Hello all, we are moving into week 8. This is our final class, or our final week. I hope that you've enjoyed the last 8 weeks as much as I have. This week's lecture is going to be on transition and change from 1968 to 1992. We're going to talk about when the definition of a normal family changed, what's the impact of all those post-World War II babies being born, and look at the 70s and 80s when some of you were born. So the economy starts growing at a slower pace during this period. There's a change from an industrial society to a post-industrial society or service society. From 1970 to 1990, employment increased 47%. 2% of that increase was manufacturing, and 98% of that was service. The growth in service and financial and sales really picks up during this period from 1970 to 1990. And part of the things that come along with that is lower wages, fewer benefits, part-time or part-of-the-year employment. It pits social groups against one another. There's divisions along race, gender, and ethnicity. There's an increasing pressure to reduce spending on welfare programs when we're actually seeing a need for them because of the decrease in hours that people are working and other issues like the lack of benefits. There's ongoing opposition to social welfare programs. Conservative New Right is suspicious of the government programs. They saw social welfare as connected to a declining competitiveness of the American economies, the weakening of the family structure, and the general decline of American moral character. President Reagan is elected. This is shifting in power from federal to states, public sectors back to voluntary agencies like we've talked about in the past, open-ended federal entitlement to limited blocked grants. Impact was not an elimination of programs, but an incremental reduction in their funding. And what that means is a lot of the programs are still out there, but it reduces what they're able to do and who they're able to provide for. So family structure was also changing during this period from 1970 to 1990s. Ideal American family was parents and children. It existed in less than 30% of homes. Working husband, stay-at-home wife, and children in 13% of American families. Female-headed households were growing in 1990. 51% of black children, 27% of Hispanic children, and 16% of white children. 34% of one-parent female-headed households were poor. And part of what that demonstrates is not only the change in family demographics, but the poverty that female-dominated houses or female-headed households would experience. So there's an aging population increase. Statistics, 1935 from Social Security, 6% were 65 and older. In 2009, 12.9% are 65 and older. At 2013, the U.S. Department of Health expects that number to be about 19% will be 65 and older. So you can see the jump from 1935 to 2009, which is when we're starting to see the aging of some of our baby boomers. It doubles. And it may seem like a smaller growth, but we're only talking 20 years away, and we're still talking about another 7% growth because of the longer life expectancy of people. Poverty among the age has dropped thanks to Social Security, the minimum income for elderly, and a supplemental Social Security income index to keep pace with inflation. Children in poverty, the war on poverty did have a positive impact. In 1959, 26% of children were impoverished. In 1970, 15% of children. So that's a huge drop. And in 1990, it went up again to 20% of children as we see a decrease in the funding that those federal programs would get. It's currently climbing again. Today, it's at 22% of children live in a family that's below the federal poverty level. And once again, I know we looked at the federal poverty level in week 1, and I hope that maybe you'll even go back and review some of those numbers, because realize that even what we're talking about when we're talking about the federal poverty level, that is a ridiculously low standard of living. I mean, that is basically meant to measure just keeping you from starving. So it's $23,550 for a family of 4 at the poverty level, and actually $47,000 needed to cover basic expenses. So that's way more than are living below what actually will cover their basic expenses. 45% of children live in a low-income family, which is probably actually a better judge of where we are. Changes in the Native American population during this period. They were affected significantly by Reagan administration policies. Native Americans are not eligible for state or social service support. They must rely on federal assistance for job training, housing assistance, and child welfare. So anytime you're lessening the federal assistance, that severely affects the way Native Americans have received assistance. Federal cuts affected them much more directly. Unemployment on reservations reached 80%, and poverty rates reached 57% in the West. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of that when we're talking about these programs being cut, that it's going to affect some groups more than others. And for Native Americans who don't receive any state assistance, it's really crucial to them. So my references this week, unfortunately you'll notice that there's not a lot of graphics for change in family size and these kind of transitional changes we're talking about in the 70s to 90s. But these are still the same with the where I get my information from to give you guys an idea. Thanks. Have a great day.